Good morning. Here we are, the last day of May. Welcome back. And I am ready to finish this up, at least what we're going to do for right now. As I said, I'm going to be traveling. I will have somebody at my house. I know people say you're not supposed to tell people when you travel, but there's someone here with my dogs. They have protection. So, it's an interesting thing that people worry about the fact that Americans have guns. A lot of us do. Even the ones who want gun regulation have guns. It is what it is. So I just want everybody to know that because they say, don't worry, people could break in your house, blah, blah, blah. Um, my son still lives here. He works from home, just like I do. And he has the dogs and he has protection. So I'm pretty confident about being able to say that I will be traveling. My house will be okay. So anyway, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here with our timer, like we do. And I will start that right now. And I was in a mastermind yesterday, and I was in the hot seat, which happens. It's a good thing. It helps you get clarity on your business and what you do for your clients and what you do for people. And what I got clarity on yesterday, which was actually pretty exciting, was that we have something in business that we call a pivot, and that's when you decide to do something very different than what you've been doing. I am not pivoting. I am adjusting. And there's a difference. Because in pivoting, you do something very, very different than what you've done. When you adjust, I have always been a coach. I have always coached people to do things in a certain way. And I'm going to keep that. I'm not getting rid of that. But what I realized when I had to sit in this hot seat was that I know what I want. I've always known what I want. And it's to help people live a better life. Now, that can look a lot of different ways. One of the things that is incredibly important to me is my creativity. And I noticed, especially lately, that people aren't creating like they used to. There's so much stress, and it makes it hard to create. And what I would really like to do, I can't change what's going on in the world, but I can change people's perspectives. And that's part of why I'm doing this decluttering for myself, because I know that when things are crazy in my house, now I know other people don't have this, but I know when things are crazy in my house that I struggle. I struggle to be creative. And that's a big deal. Now, I know other people that can be creative, but then everything in their home seems to go by the wayside. And this is really more for women than men. There are so many things that we can let deter us from our creativity. Yet we say we don't have time for it, yet it's really like the air that we breathe. It is so important for people who are creative to create, because it's like I've said this before, it's kind of what keeps us sane. And it's so easy to dismiss that when we've got a million other things going on. At least feels like a million other things going on in our lives. And I want to work on that. with people. I want them to have time to create. I want to encourage them to create because it's those people who get us through. You know, you hear these stories about how people would sing, people would dance, you know, even in the worst of times because it gave them hope. That's why the slaves, they had songs. It was the way they gave each other hope. And those slave songs back in the day had meaning, which is, you know, why when other people sing them, sometimes it comes off as disingenuous because if you don't understand what the thing, if you don't understand the value of that and how important it was, then you're never going to be able to give the song its due, if that makes sense. I know some people would disagree with me on that, but anyway, creativity matters. And if you're a person who is creative, and I think everyone's creative. I remember having this conversation with a mom one time, and I was a room mom, and I brought a craft for all these kids to do for one of our parties. And the mom looked at me and she goes, "Oh, you're so creative. I'm not creative at all." And I said, I don't buy it. And she's like, "No, really, I can't do anything creative." And I said, "Wait a minute, she was an accountant." I said, "You're an accountant, right?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "So if I brought my taxes to you, could you help me learn how to set myself up better for tax success?" She goes, "Well, of course I can." And I said, "And you know how to find deductions that I don't even know exist, right?" And she said, "Absolutely." And I said, "That's creative to me. That's creativity. It's just your creativity is in the realm of taxes." And she looked at me stunned and she was like, "I never thought about it like that." I said, "I know, nobody ever does." So I said, "But please understand that, you know, just because you don't," and I truly believe this, just because you don't paint or write poetry or write fiction doesn't mean you're not creative. I have a brother-in-law who used to run an excavating company, and I've talked about this before. And we had a leak in a water pipe. So my brother-in-law came over, and we could either pay the city to dig up our yard, or we could pay my brother-in-law to do it. So we paid my brother-in-law to do it. And when he showed up, it was beneath a flower bed, right? And I said something about, "I really appreciate you doing this. I just wish I didn't have to destroy my flowers to do it." And what he did, which just blew my mind, my brother-in-law dug up my flower bed. They came and they fixed the pipe. But the cool thing was when he came back to put the dirt back, he replanted my flowers with a backhoe. And it was unbelievable. I'm not kidding you folks, I had a strip about maybe this wide right down the middle of my garden where he had dug it up, and like one on the other side of where his scoop was. And that was it. Otherwise, it was perfect. So I had my flowers back. I had my pipe fixed, and I was just blown away. That's artistry, my friends, that you can be that precise with a bucket, that you're digging up dirt and flowers, that you can replant the flowers. We've lived in this house, it'll be 23 years. Is that right? 2002. So yeah, 23 years at the end at the end of next month. And this was in the house before this. I'm still impressed by that. People don't understand their own artistry sometimes. And I think it's really cool when we can point that out so people really do understand what their talents really are and where their creativity comes from. And I honestly believe that some people who are just so unhappy, that's what's missing in their lives, is their connection to their own creativity. I know people that, myself included, my greatest joy is being around people I care about. And I know that sounds kind of weird and trite, but I'm good at that. I'm good at encouraging the people I know to follow their dreams, to do the things that they find that light up their soul. And that's no small thing. And I've learned that. I used to think, what's the big deal? Anybody can be a cheerleader. No, they can't, actually. They're not good at it. Sorry, my nose is really itchy. Another place that I'm very creative is in the kitchen. I always say I don't look like this because I'm a bad cook. But, not having my recipes, this is a recipe book I bought recently. Not having my recipes organized does slow me down a bit. I forget about recipes that I have. And one of the things that has been more challenging lately is I've had to transition to a gluten-free diet. But I forget sometimes that can be a creative process in itself. When you have to change your diet, or when you choose to change your diet, there are things that, you can do as part of the creative process. Just thinking about new meals, planning new food, new dishes, those kind of things. That's a creative process. And that's what I'm going to be leaning even harder into. And so, here's one of my favorite. This is, it was adapted from something called Eat, Drink, Love. And it's a P.F. Chang's lettuce wrap. We use ground turkey. It's a copycat, and one of our favorite. That's the other thing. You can do a lot of copycats. If you are familiar with the Food Hussy, she has a lot of copycats. Now, hers aren't gluten-free mostly. So but again, it can be one of those things where you can just make you can make a creative process out of it, I've got old family recipes of mine. And I've got old family recipes. One of my favorites, and that's right here. I'm looking at it. My dad's deviled eggs. My dad, now his are on the sweet side, so if you like mustardy ones, you're not gonna like them. But anyway, his deviled eggs were so good. But it took him 3 to 4 hours to make them. Now, granted, he didn't have access or didn't think about some of the things I did, because I do cook. I do bake. I bake a lot, or I used to. I've taken his 3 to 4 hour process down to, I actually did it in 40 minutes the other day for my son. He was going to a picnic. And the reason it wasn't completely because of him. We cooked the eggs, and the eggs were old. Eggs started bothering my stomach, so I really wasn't eating them much, where I was eating probably one a day before then. So I stopped eating them for a while, and these eggs were a lot older than we thought. And so they didn't cook well. So he had to go get another dozen eggs, and I had to recook them. So we only had about 40 minutes. But anyway, but I did it. I did it in 40 minutes. And so what I started doing, and what made it easier, was that I went from he cooked them in on the stove. I cook them in the Instant Pot. That speeds up the process. I also have a helper most of the time who cracks the eggs for me. And then I cut them, and I use a food processor where my dad used to do everything by hand with a fork. He still might do that if he was here because he liked them. This makes it very smooth, and I like it like that. I'm not sure that he would, but and then the final thing was putting that into the eggs took him a long time because he did it with a spoon. I use a piping bag. So the addition of the Instant Pot, the food processor, and I mean, I tell you what, it's 2 minutes to fill those max, and that's if I do 2 dozen eggs. So anyway, but just having that recipe, because he always did it by, there was no recipe, so I literally made him tell me, and so his recipes basically says 2 heaping serving spoons of Miracle Whip. Yes, Miracle Whip, not mayonnaise. I told you they were sweet. So anyway, so that's it. That's what he got. But having them organized helps. They're not as organized as they could be, but again, we make little progresses. This was progress over where I had them. And when I moved them from the old binder to this binder, I got rid of a lot of duplicates or things that I'm like, you know what? Now that I'm gluten-free, I'm not going to make that. Or now that my kids are grown, I'm not going to make that kind of thing. And so that's kind of where we are. But I just wanted to let people know I'm probably going to continue to go live. I am looking at creating a workshop or I'm not sure what I'm going to call it. I guess a workshop is what it would be, but I want people to take time to be creative. And these little things that I do every day are ways that you can make space for creativity in your life. So that's what I wanted to share with everybody today. I'm going to continue to do that. If you want more information, the best way for you to do that is to go to movingtowardbetter.com. You can sign up for our email community. It's right there at the top that you can do that. And keep watching, subscribe here, like, comment, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Then you'll know when I'm going live all the time. So you guys have a great day, an even better weekend, and I will see y'all on Monday. Have a good one. Bye. Nope, we're going to have a problem. There we go. Love you guys.